I really like making these videos. And my aim of these videos is to connect with somebody out there in the workplace or maybe somewhere in the world who's dealing with a particular situation of looking at a leader and they understand that this leader truly isn't at the level that they should be. Something that I truly believe in is that leaders, specifically championship leaders, they seek responsibility through their thinking. And when I'm talking about thinking, I'm talking about critical thinking. And to apply critical thinking, you have to have the ability to think about your thinking, which is called metacognition, or either a macro level of thinking. I'm constantly always processing. What am I thinking about? What am I doing? What have I done? It's just what I've grown into be. As a kid, I always did it. And as a young adult, I always did it. And I found that it was quite beneficial to me because I wasn't making the same repeated errors in judgment. No way am I saying that I am perfect. I strive for perfection, but I am not perfect. And when I miss the mark, when I'm not hitting center mass of the target, I always self reflect back and I apply what they call self referent thought. Self referent thought is a specific type of thinking where I'm thinking about the knowledge that I possess and identifying if there's any validity to it, if it's accurate, and if it's reliable with how I'm applying it based upon my personal experiences. I also utilize these two forms of thinking when I'm observing the things around me because I can learn so much more vicariously. And something that I truly understand about leaders that I've worked with and some of the mentors and the gurus that I've worked with is that championship leaders, they are constantly seeking responsibility and they acquire their responsibility through the acquisition of knowledge and experience. They get this knowledge and they go apply it to find out if it works. And they do that through critical thinking. Now, how I apply championship leadership is through a mindset development. And I do this on a scientific basis of applied psychology. That's taking the theoretical concepts and applying them inside of the workplace. Everything that I'm doing, I'm framing it inside of the workplace. And if you're working at home or you're working inside your family, you can apply these techniques also. And so I'm looking at how we train, retain, and motivate our employees or individuals around us to establish the baseline capabilities of your team, of your organization. And what I'm doing is I'm arguing the point, I'm presenting the argument that an organizational governance system which dictates the organizational behavior will influence those employees to perform at a high level, a very high level, to either meet or exceed that organization standard. And that's based upon what modern system theory articulates. And what I'm doing is I'm continuing to refine and link the humanistic output, the applied psychology, with the structural output of, let's say, a framework within the operation management system of TQM, which is total quality management. That's just a system of thinking inside of the organization, talking about how am I going to provide high quality products and services. And something that I truly understand is really reflecting back on my past experiences and some of the leaders that I worked with. I'm like, they were absent of this knowledge because they continued to work so inefficiently in their processes and never learning from the past. Um, and this is a self regulating ecosystem that is constantly thinking about its thinking and reflecting on past behaviors. Now, when we talk about reflecting on our past behaviors, we have to shape ourselves into championship leaders by owning our responsibilities. And what I mean by that is when we own our responsibilities, when we step inside of a workplace or a workplace environment or either in a team environment, we accept certain responsibilities. And those responsibilities are based upon an organization governance system, which is the objective truth. And what that does is that prevents us of injecting our personal biases into a situation and literally muddying the waters. I loved how Nick Saban said his job was to get the right people on the bus and get the wrong people off the bus. And when he got people on the bus, he had to put them in the right seat based upon their skills and competencies and what they could do on the playing field or either in the film room or however they contributed to the team. And he says, if you will never have any team chemistry if you cannot get everybody to buy into the organizational standard. That's why the dude won so many championships. Because when he said, tuck your shirt in, that's how you wore the uniform. That was the team standard. And that was an acceptable standard by everybody on the team. When I was in the military, there was one way to wear the uniform. And that was by the organization standard, the Army standard wear and appearance of the uniform. You tucked your t-shirt in. You see, leadership cannot achieve an operationally high, excellent state by ignoring the human element. You have to understand they're not machines, they're not cogs in the wheel, and you're dealing with human beings. So you have to recognize that you're also a human being inside of the organization because championship leaders, they literally think and behave on a different level because there's levels to this game. And we're talking about thinking on a level of knowledge that applies theoretical concepts and applying them inside of the workplace. And that is that bridge of applied science. Because leaders, specifically championship leaders, they have this growth mindset and they are constantly seeking that responsibility and they're taking responsibilities for their organization's products and services that really shapes lives in the marketplace. Because when I sit back and I look at when I accepted the role of a leader, and I remember this a long, long time ago when I was very fortunate. I went to a leadership school when I was 19 years old when I first joined the Army. And I came in the Army as an E4 back in 1990, and you can't do it anymore. I did 4 years of high school ROTC, and then I passed a specific military test for my MOS, which got me an accelerated promotion to E4. So I was 18 years old and a specialist in the Army. And then when I left Korea after spending 14 months there driving for a brigade commander, he was like, dude, I can't promote you, but I have to be able to do something special for you. And so they sent me to PLDC, and I was like one of the youngest individuals to ever graduate Camp Jackson in Korea, their PLDC program at 19 years old. So when I showed up to my new unit in California at Fort Hunter Liggett, they immediately sent me to the board because I was just some freak. I was some anomaly. I was some specialist that was 19 years old and I just graduated PLDC. So I was a young corporal at 19 years old. I didn't know my butt from a hole in the wall. I really didn't. I was lost and I was constantly learning. But what I learned at that time, because I had that experience of working with senior leaders at such a very young age and seeing how they worked and how they interacted with each other, and then I took my experience and my upbringing from high school and high school ROTC. I accepted that as a leader, I took on that burden or that fiduciary responsibility of my moral duties of discerning the difference between right and wrong. And I had to be totally selfless, excuse me, to my organization and to my team. And I wasn't just responsible for my outputs of what I did, but I was responsible for the collective's products and they produce within my tank platoon. And I've always carried this mindset and this attitude as I move forward. And that is what I call the suffrage of leadership. So I further emphasize the aspect that, owning your responsibilities is literally one of the only mechanisms that produces consistent outcomes inside of the workplace. We're talking about the consistency of high quality products. Now, I want you to pay attention to when things go awry inside of an organization. What do you do inside of an organization when you do have inconsistencies? Because they're going to happen. Pseudo leaders will say something like, my team failed to facilitate QTM. Now, a championship leader will sit back and look at themselves first before they project anything outwards when everything goes awry. And they'll say, how did I fail my team? Did I educate and train my team appropriately on QTM? Because you see, my or either your leadership floor sets the ceiling of your team's performance. Your team's maximum potential is affected by the skills and the behaviors and the standards of the leader. I can only give what I have. If I don't have any knowledge on a particular process or system, I need to outsource that and go find a subject matter expert who has a high competency in that particular area. But that takes me as a leader to be self-aware to say, and to live with intellectual humility and say, I don't understand this. And that's perfectly fine because I'm not protecting my ego. I'm protecting the organization. And if I need to bring somebody into my organization and say, why do we have a deviation off of my organization standard? And I don't understand the psychology behind this. Hey, Dr. Irby, Mr. Irby, why don't you come in and help me out? I can help you out with that. But leaders cannot expect for their team to achieve a high level of greater excellence of the products or the growth than the manager's competencies that they possess and what they tolerate. So when you start looking inside of your organization management system and you're not meeting or exceeding that TQM standard, then everything falls back on that particular leader. Because if accountability is absent, point to the leader. If the results are inconsistent, then the standard was inconsistent. The performance towards the objective of the standard was inconsistent. And that goes back to the leader. Because remember, when you're inside of an organization and you volunteered and said, hey, I want to get this increase in paycheck, with that increase in paycheck came an increase in responsibilities. It's your life. Seek responsibility and take responsibility of your thinking and your behaviors inside of the workplace. Because when you do that, you develop a growth mindset. And when you communicate to your employees, hey, I'm able to make mistakes. I am not perfect. If you have a better way that we can provide this service and this product, what is it? Because what that does is that encourages that entrepreneurial mindset inside of the workplace, that innovative mindset that is going to continue to progress that organization towards obtaining its strategic objectives. And that is one of the clearest expressions of leadership, which is absolute total commitment and ownership to my thinking and my behaviors. Because understand, there are people out there that are watching me, and as a leader, I'm in a fishbowl and I have to take accountability of what I do every single day. So to close this out, I sit back and I ask, when was the last time you sought any type of responsibility, or when was it assigned to you? When was the last time you took on that burden of leadership? Go ahead and drop it in the comments. And if you don't want to drop it in the comments, you know the deal. Contact me at my website, shoot me an email, shoot me a phone call, shoot me a text message, and literally follow along on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, because Monday is all about the know, Wednesday is all about the be, and Friday is all about execution, the do. I look forward to talking to you later.